90.5 FM. The following is a special presentation of 1330 WFIN and 95.5 FM.
WFIN News is pleased to present live coverage of the 2025 Findlay State of the City Address. Now from the Marathon Center for the Performing Arts, along with Findlay Mayor Christina Mern, here's WFIN's Chris Oakes.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Marathon Center for the Performing Arts in Arms Hall for today's State of the City fireside chat with Findlay Mayor Christina Mern. I'm Chris Oakes from WFIN Radio. And a couple of things before we get started. First of all, we are obviously looking forward to hearing directly from Mayor Mern in the past year, looking forward to some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, and also a number of questions from community members that we'll get to in just a bit. Please note that we will not have audience participation live here at the event. And before we get started, for those who are here with us in person, we ask that you take a moment and silence your electronic devices so that we don't have any interruptions for everyone's benefit. And thank you very much. With that, please welcome Findlay Mayor Christina Mern. So, I guess the place to start, because with a State of the City or a State of the State or a State of the Union, the classic line is, the State of the City is, I'll let you finish that statement.
Amazing.
Wow. Why do you say that?
Well, you know what? Looking back at this past year and as we are planning for 2025, I am first and foremost so grateful to be able to lead such a wonderful community. We have accomplished so much. We've set the city in such a great position. And as we look at 2025, we're going to have the pedal to the metal and keep pushing for great progress in our community that benefits everyone.
So let's hit some of the highlights from the past year. And I've got a list of bullet points here, including flood mitigation, which I know we're into the home stretch finally on that. Talking about redevelopment of the Findlay Mall. There was obviously in the past year a lot of information on that. The downtown recreation area and redevelopment in that area. A lot of things going on up on County Road 99 and I-75. So a lot of things going on. I'm just going to kind of open it up, hit some of the highlights and the things that you think are most important and that you are most proud of from the past year.
Yeah, well, you definitely hit on a lot of the top ones, but I think one of the things that I'm always most proud of is just strong operations. We are very fortunate to have a great team of 370 employees that serve our community diligently every day. And it's those little things that, you know, are the core business of city government that make a huge impact, but it's really easy to take them for granted. So whether it's fixing potholes within a day and a half of them being reported, of putting 20% of our income tax revenue directly into capital improvements. Obviously, we talk a lot about the big projects with flood mitigation and park improvements, trails expansion, those quality life amenities that are so essential. But really the things that I'm excited about and proud of are that we continue to be good stewards of our resources, that we are an employer of choice and continuing to make sure that we stay that way when we look at workforce and it being challenging. You obviously have to manage a team really well. But I think we're going to hit on some of the other highlights with the mall and different items. But our community is in a really strong position, and I think as we continue to look at how we make it better, those are the things that people pay attention to or are excited about. So whether it's, you know, the decades-old mall that's kind of been slowly dying as malls have gone to the wayside, being invested in and redeveloped, or finally it looks like we'll be making movements on the Lincoln School and the Argyle project. So being conducive to private investment that is going to maintain a 100-year-old building and then also, you know, fill a gap literally in our downtown skyline.
I want to go back to flood mitigation because obviously that's been a topic that has been such a long time coming, and there's been so much involved in making that happen. In the past year, the city was given a $28 million grant from FEMA to complete those flood mitigation projects. Of course, a lot of things have changed in the intervening months with respect to the federal government, particularly federal spending. How much of that is already in the bank account? How much of that has yet to be dispersed? And are you concerned that that $28 million that has been pledged will actually come to fruition?
Yeah, so I'm confident, as we've been speaking with our current senators as well as the administration, that that is a project they continue to be dedicated to. You know, in the prior Trump administration, flood mitigation was a top priority when I would speak with them then. They recognized that flooding in our communities, especially legacy cities, is something that has changed dramatically, and that you can't have communities suffering with these ongoing problems. And one of the things that really benefits our community in attracting that federal investment is the local commitment that we have made. So, you know, we say it's been a long time coming. Yeah, it's over a century, right? The flood in 1913. But as they have, we've really evolved as a community, putting on that sales tax, acquiring the property, not using eminent domain, the city and county setting aside funds, the state putting up $60 million over, you know, a 10-year period. By us doing that and putting the investment into the environmental studies and all of those different aspects, we set ourselves up for success for the Federal Rail Administration grant that we received a couple years ago of $7 million, as well as the current FEMA flood hazard mitigation grant. So just this past week, not with the FEMA grant, but with the Federal Rail Administration grant, the Trump administration signed off on that. So they recognize the benefit that flood mitigation provides to our community and economic investment that won't happen if we don't get this done.
There are a couple of other things in 2024, speaking of grants and grant monies and things that may have flown under the radar for some folks, including the $100,000 of ARPA funds that was spent on beautification, on the tree program.
Yeah, so the city administration decided that with the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, because they were one-time monies, we didn't want to put them into operational programs, but rather capital investments that were essential to our community. So whether it was replacing generators at the Cube or other facilities that are essential services, that if they lose power, that's critical. Obviously, we need our water treatment plant to have water. Yeah, Jason, we make sure that the water treatment plant keeps running. But one of the other things is continuing to build out our tree canopy. So again, trees add such benefit from beautification, which is, you know, the one you see right when you drive down the street, but they also help with property values. They help with cleaning the air, all of those different amenities that I think are really essential. And one of the things that we heard during the strategic planning process that people love is that small town feel and the walkable neighborhoods and that connectivity and beautiful neighborhoods. And so that's something that we felt was important to reinvest in, and we planted over 370 trees throughout the community.
$250,000 for improvements at the Miracle Park.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we've been really intentional about as a community. When I came in, we had about a 5-year capital plan that we looked at, but really just a 2-year concentrated plan. And we said, how do we continue to build this out? We started putting together a 10-year capital plan that's available on our website. And one of the things that does, going back to kind of that good governance, is it puts us to look farther out and say, okay, if we start planning now, that sets us up to be able to receive grants or to get donor investment into projects that are shovel ready. And that's always puts you at the top of the list when you're going out after competitive funding. And so the Miracle Field is obviously a great asset to our community. It's a really unique amenity. And we were just talking about how we might be able to hold the All-Star game in the near future again. But being able to continually make investment, leverage donations and these grant funds are able to make investments in our community that we may not otherwise be able to make.
Do you also see that in terms of economic development as something that will continue? I mean, obviously one of the other big highlights being named top micropolitan community for the 10th year in a row. You mentioned earlier referencing being a growing community with respect to more jobs coming in and employer top employment location. This kind of builds on that. That's a component of this too.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I always think about the third place. And it's a concept of you have your home, and then you have work, and then you need somewhere else to belong, and typically you want it to be somewhere free. So for a lot of people, it may be a church. For others, it could be a public park or a YMCA. For kids, it's school, home, and something else. And so being able to make sure that we are a balanced community where people have a safe housing environment and a home that they feel safe in, have a good job or school, and then that third place is about that community building, and that is investing in parks, which may be the Miracle Field, and obviously is a unique access, but it's something that is accessible to everyone. I love taking my nieces and nephews there. My arms get tired from pushing them on the zip line, but it's a ton of fun. And so that is an important part of building a strong community, is thinking about all three of those levels.
Reference the parks, outdoor spaces. The Greenway Trail project was completed in the past year.
Yes, so an extension from Bright Road out to 236 was the next phase, and this year we are going to be under construction with 236 out to Riverbend Park. This has been a multi-year capital program, and we'll continue to also then look at building out to the west. If you look from the University of Findlay out to Walmart, creating that connectivity, but we want to continue west to get out to Litzenberg Park so that you would be able to, on the majority of it being protected multi-use paths, be able to get from Litzenberg Park out to Riverbend Park. And really, if you look at the statewide trails map, Northwest Ohio is not well developed. And so there's a concerted effort across all of our communities to continue to build that out and to create larger connectivity, because that is not just a quality of life amenity and obviously a public health amenity, but it also is something that is going to drive economic development in the region.
I would also be remiss while we're talking about the highlights of 2024, because I saw the fire chief here a little bit earlier, the completion of the Strick Center, which is another project that has been a long time in the making.
Yeah, the Strick Center, or the Simulated Tactical Response and Incident Command Training Center. Try to say that 10 times fast.
That's why I didn't.
Honestly, try to say it 3 times fast. But yeah, so we finally got that under construction and open. If you have not been out to it, please call us and get a tour set up. It is a great amenity for our community that is a city, county, private donor, and public company grants that made it all happen. And it is for our first responders and safety services to be able to train in coordinated efforts to respond. So one of the things that we may not think about on a daily basis, but that our safety services need to be able to train for, is what if there is a domestic violence situation where an individual is keep somebody hostage in their house and the house is set on fire? How do we to respond to that? Our officers and fire department and EMS need to be able to train to be able to do that. So we have built a house with movable walls so that they can switch up their training to do things on repeat, because in a crisis situation, you fall back to your training that has become patterned, that has become a part of who you are. And so we need to be able to do that. And one of the things I'm really excited about it is that the opportunity it provides to our volunteer firefighters in the region. Because if there's a large-scale incident and we have volunteer fire departments supporting the Findlay Fire Department, I want to make sure that they are at the same level of expertise when they're having my teams back as if they are serving each other just on the line.
Okay, so anything else in 2024 that I didn't mention that we want to make sure that we highlight from the year past?
There is tons of stuff to highlight, but we only have an hour, so make sure you follow us on social media and check out our website.
So looking ahead, 2025, obviously just underway, what are the priorities for the coming year?
Yeah, so
very open-ended. I'll let you go from there.
That is broad. So obviously continued operations. Obviously with this year we did prepare a deficit budget once again. And again, I talk about that and I will try to explain it very quickly because city finances are very convoluted. But one of the things that folks don't always understand is that in city government, when we are doing an appropriation for a budget, is that I could hand Chris in one hand blue dollars and the other hand green dollars, $4 in each hand. And I can say, you can use this money for other and this for personnel. Well, suddenly, and I'm holding blue dollars. I didn't say blue, did I? Different color than whatever I told him he had. and suddenly his roof breaks and he has a leak. Now that is something that you don't want to just sit and linger because it's going to cause additional damage. In city government, if my department has been allocated money and they suddenly have a disaster occur, a roof breaks, they only have, I say it's cost you $6 to fix that repair, but you only have $4 that you can use on it because the other 4 are reserved for personnel. Well, you need to come back and ask me for more money, come back to city council and get those funds, but that takes time. And in the meantime, you're having more operational issues. So what we have done over the years is worked with our departments to say, we trust you to manage your dollars and to give money back, but we are going to give you a little bit of margin in your budget to be able to manage your department. And you can switch between line items within objects or within the other categories, and you can move money within your personnel, but they can't cross buckets. And so we have proposed the deficit budget, but we got to manage that. Okay, sorry. So 2025 operations, do you want to ask me about that?
Oh, well, that's what I was going to... You do bring up the fact that the budget is in deficit, and there has been some discussion among City Council and so on. I think City Council, I think Ali Prishu is that we're going to hold the mayor's feet to the fire on this. We do have a balance, a carryover balance in the city coffers, correct? But you don't want to get to the point where you no longer have that. So,
yeah. So I agree, and she certainly should. That is part of her responsibility as a city council member. It's also my responsibility as the city administrator to make sure that we're not putting the city in a precarious situation. Mm-hmm. So since 2019, the city of Findlay has practically doubled our carry forward balance. In 2019, we had $13 million of carry forward, and this year we have about $26 million in carryover. That does not even include our $2 million rainy day fund, which we have increased with an additional $500,000. In the past 4 years, we also increased the minimum reserve amount from 3 months of spending to 25% of the total operating budget. We've increased our severance payout fund reserve as well as our self-insurance fund. We have put the city of Findlay in a very good cash position, and that doesn't even account for the additional $5 million in capital improvements that we have made over and above the 20% capital allocation. So we definitely have a thinner margin moving forward, but we had to make an improvement to our pay for our staff members. We are a service organization. And when we're talking about a general fund operating budget deficit, that is only looking really at our personnel, insurance, those types of items, the chemicals, all those different line items that take for operations. And so our departments have to manage their budgets. They know our expectations. We look at it on a monthly basis, and I have confidence that our departments will be at or above what our revenues will be, because that's what we've done the last 5 years, is continue to add to our unappropriated budget.
Looking longer term, if you get into a deficit spending situation, that is not a situation that is likely to improve. Ask the Findlay City Schools about what happens when you continually deficit spend. So is there an expectation that if you're deficit spending now that you won't be at some point in the future?
Well, so this is the difference. We are proposing a deficit budget. We are not actually deficit spending. Our teams manage their budgets throughout the year to give back, and that's how we've gone from a $13 million carryover to a $26 million carryover. That's not a deficit spend. So we are proposing it, and we're saying, yes, we recognize that we have to manage it, but we aren't deficit spending at this point in time, and we're going to track it. And if things start to become an issue, then our departments will need to recalibrate to look at that. But I have full confidence that we'll be able to manage it. And again, we increased the minimum reserve amount, which again gives us additional margin, because per that statute, we have committed as the administration to say, if we are going to be below that, then we also have to show our plan to get out of that.
I want to have you talk about the Findlay Forward Strategic Plan in 2025. What is that, and what is the What is the time frame? I mean, give us kind of outline that for us.
Yeah, so in 2023, we worked through the Finley Forward strategic planning process where we did a variety of community engagement to really just refine from the public what are we hearing as the core goals for our community, what do we want to look like, who do we want to be, and how do we want to get there. And so there were 7 main principles that were identified. I don't think any of them were extremely exciting. They were core operations of a city government. We want to be a safe community. We want to care about our built environment. We want to be connected. We want to have a thriving business environment. All of those different things. And now we have been looking, 2024, we implemented that. We started moving forward. In 2025, the big emphasis is going to be realigning all of our key performance indicators within our departments to tie back to the strategic plan. If you go on our transparency page now, all of our departments have key performance indicators which show how they are operating and being held accountable. But we want to make it more clear on how they directly support the goals that the community gave us as their priorities.
So a couple of other things looking ahead to 2025. Again, these are kind of carryover things from 2024. The downtown recreation area, where does that stand? What is the next step? What is the timeline through the coming year?
Yeah, so the downtown recreation area is a project focused, when we look at flood mitigation in our final 3 projects with the Norfolk Southern Railroad Bridge, the Eagle Creek Basin, and then the Phase 2 benching. That Phase 2 benching is the property area just north of the river, right adjacent to Main Street. That's 19 acres of property in our downtown that are usable space when they are not flooded. And so, well, what can you build in an area that is prone to flooding? We don't want to build buildings, but we can build infrastructure that makes sure that it is usable space for our community when it's not flooded. And so we have been engaged with Strand to put together a recreation plan to build pathways, a multi-purpose stage, a skate park, playgrounds, some shelter houses, different things that would be able to be flooded and still be usable space. But how do we make sure that if, okay, it's flooded, 6 days a year, how do we make sure that other 360, are it's usable space? And I always think of it as, and I know I'm like, this is Central Park. When people said in this prime real estate in the most desired city of the world, and we're going to set it apart and make green space, they were like, you're going to do what? And I get that obviously we're different, but that's the type of opportunity that we have here, is to make sure that it is something special. And so it is a heavy lift. It's a big vision. It's going to take time for us to do it. But when we look at it, even to just do kind of basic amenities is going to be expensive. And so how do we make sure that we are also looking at a big picture and engaging local businesses, local donors, the state as well as federal government focused on park development, and make this a real asset that we can all be proud of for decades to come.
How much do you expect the city will come out of the city's share of this?
Yeah, so my goal is that it would be no more than $10 million set aside over a period of time. We're still working through refining the cost estimates, and one of the—
I was going to say, there have been estimates as high as, $40 million? So.
Yeah, and when they look at that, that is for the high end of all of the different elements, escalated to 2027 construction with a 10% contingency and a 2% soft cost. So they are conservative numbers, but again, to do it right, it also can be very costly. So we will also look at phasing if appropriate. So there are certain elements, right? The pedestrian bridge is a huge lift. It's an item that could be very costly. That may be something that say we are only going to do that if somebody wants to come in and make a significant gift to make that happen. So that's what we're going to work through. Big projects like this take a lot of time and planning, and we're also going to be working over the next couple of months to do additional public engagement.
So does that mean that we would probably not see anything substantial, any physical changes to that area in 2025? I mean, is this something that dirt would be turned, again, in a future year?
So no, you will not see work related to the downtown recreation area in 2025, except for potentially some work on the south bank. So where the existing Riverwalk is, that's in pretty bad condition, as well as the retaining wall underneath it is going to need replaced in the near future. So we may look at doing some work there, but the work on the downtown recreation amenities cannot occur until the benching is underway. And so we are marrying up some of the dirt movement that would need to occur for the downtown recreation amenities so that we're not moving dirt twice if there's areas that need additional dirt work as part of the benching.
A couple of other issues that we are facing, and again, these are carryover, these are not new issues, especially with respect to housing, the availability of affordable housing, the availability of housing for those unhoused within the community. I know that you have put together a coalition, a task force, if you will, to address the problem of homelessness. Talk a little bit about the goals for that in 2025 and continuing to address this ongoing, and it's certainly not unique to Findlay, but the ongoing challenge of affordable housing.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So 2025 housing is certainly a top priority, and I didn't say that when we were talking about 2025 priorities because I got distracted explaining money. But as we look at 2025, that's something that I'm really focused on and trying to figure out. And the state legislature, and you're right, it is a national issue. When we go back to 2008 through 2012, we lost a lot of local developers, small developers. The housing incentives shifted in the United States to focus on apartments and commercially taxed properties, so condos and apartment buildings. And we really haven't seen great programs related to helping developers offset the increased cost of infrastructure investment for new subdivisions, as well as we're not seeing individuals leave their homes because the cost of moving into an apartment or another home is so much higher. So we're not seeing that market turnover that you really need for a healthy economy for first-time home buyers especially. So in the city of Findlay, some of the things we're going to look at is how do we help get folks to look at infill development. So some of the changes we made to our zoning code a couple of years ago allowed for more infill development for duplexes and triplexes in certain areas of town. We also are talking about how do we help with potential infrastructure cost offset and have payback periods with development. We don't have any specific plans at this point, but we're investigating some of the state programs and are speaking with Senator McCauley. I know the legislature, that's a top priority for them as well. But it's something that we're going to have to, we didn't get into this situation overnight. It's going to take time to figure it out. I think one of the things is how do we help get our community to utilize the Welcome Home Ohio program that also helps first-time home buyers. So those are some of the things we're going to be looking at.
What about the criticism that the increased housing that we are seeing is not at the affordable level, that is more the higher level, whether we're talking about rental, mostly rental properties that we've seen go up, apartments and so on, that are just out of the affordability scale for lower middle income families?
Yeah, so I always like to say accessible housing, and that there's a reason for that, because affordable means different things to different people, right? When you're looking at the goal, the target for expense related to housing is 30% or lower of someone's income to be a healthy balance, but that changes with your income. So one of the things, I think it's good that we're continuing to see housing investment even at those higher price points, because that provides economic mobility for the individuals that can afford it to get out of some of the properties that may be less cost prohibitive for those that don't have that economic mobility. So we definitely need more housing of all types and at all price points, and we definitely need that. So again, we need to see some of the single family residential that is more accessible at lower price points, but we don't have a good solution at this point. I think it's going to be a yes and solution because we need all types and all, but one of the things that I would really like to see is more single family residential, because then people are not just making and again, I was a landlord, I understand that market, we need to have a healthy market there too, but people want to have an asset that is theirs, that they're building up equity in, and that creates longer term financial stability rather than just investing in rental.
I have to ask you about the mall redevelopment because that is the question on everybody's mind and has been for quite some time. What's happening at the mall, and can you tell us who's coming in that center part of the mall that's about to come down?
Something's happening at the mall?
Something's happening at the mall.
Interesting. That explains a lot of emails I've been getting. So yes, we are going to see a significant investment. Nothing has changed. They are still on track to make that investment. I cannot disclose who the tenant is. Believe me, I would love to say. I even called and specifically asked, hey, I have my State of the City.
We've got the
Please
city
let
coming.
me announce this. But they are working through a process, and anyone who has done a big deal before, you don't announce things until ink is on paper. And so they have been working through all of the different purchase requirements that the developer had to fulfill before they could officially close on the property. At this point in time, and I know I've been saying it for a while, my understanding is that early March is when the official closing will happen and that we will have public information to be able to share.
What happens next in that property? Because that's the center part of the mall that's coming down. Obviously, on the one side, you've got Best Buy, you've got Michael's, you've got Dunham's, you've got what used to be, well, it's Runnings now, it used to be Big R. But then behind, as I understand it, that's not coming down. Is that going to eventually, I mean, what do you see for the rest of that property?
Yeah, so a portion of the current tenants are going to be relocated within the portion that is staying, and they may attract additional stores with the announcement of the new tenant. I think there'll be some desire to be in that area.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is this, do you see this as the final step, or this is it, or is this just the beginning of something that's much bigger?
I think that it's always the start of something bigger. You always have an opportunity. I think we've really seen over the past year when this new developer came in and they split up the parcels and we said, what are you doing? They said, well, this is the plan. And we're like, oh, okay, well, that actually makes a lot more sense for that property. So we saw Cane's come in. We see the Sheetz gas station under construction right now. We see the plans for the demolition in the middle. We're going to see some of the current tenants relocated to that area, and I think some of the tenants that are being displaced may then come back to that area. But a lot of national retailers look at the data of who else is located in that area, how are they performing, and that helps bring them in. Starbucks was a prime example. It took us forever to get a Starbucks, and then now we have like, what, 3 or 4 of them? You know, so they follow that market data.
You mentioned Sheetz. Let me ask you this real quickly before we get to some of the questions, because we want to get to some of the questions that have been submitted by the public, which actually speak to a number of these same issues, so we'll have a chance to delve into them a little bit more. But you mentioned Sheetz. There is a back and forth between the city and the county regarding Sheetz. They want to develop on the north side of town, off of 99. Where does that stand, and do you feel that you will be able to come to some sort of an agreement? Because at this point, it seems to be an impasse between the city and the county.
So
that could impact future economic development as well.
Yeah, so the county commissioners denied the annexation, and the city, I spoke with the developer. We have an agreement. They have submitted an appeal, and we are allowing them to proceed with construction. I didn't feel it was right for them to be penalized over this kind of bickering. And so we are working through it. I had a really good meeting with County Commissioner Bateson as well as Kevin Flanagan, Allen Township trustee, and are working through a revenue sharing agreement. It seems to be that is part of the main hang-up. Currently, they are under the Ohio Revised Code revenue sharing structure. I had shared a revenue sharing agreement template in the past that we have with some of our other townships, and they are sending some feedback on that. So my hope is that in the next couple of months, we will be able to resolve that, and I think we will all be able to recognize that the development in this area is going to benefit all of us, and just because they're connected into the city systems and potentially in city limits doesn't mean that they aren't providing economic benefit to the township as well.
So we're going to leave it there. We've gone through the first half, flown by the first half of our time here. Next, we're going to spend some time going through questions that were received from community members from all over the community and even some from outside the city, which was good to see. So we're going to try and get to as many of those as we possibly can. We'll do that after a very brief break, and we'll be back with more from Findlay Mayor Christina Murn in the State of the City on 1330 WFIN, WFIN.com, and 95.5 FM.
Take WFIN wherever you go with our updated mobile apps for iPhone and Android. And now you can listen to us on your Alexa device. Get the app at WFIN.com or in the App Store or Google Play. Plus, enable Alexa by searching for WFIN under Skills, and you'll soon be saying, Alexa, play 1330 WFIN. And the best part is the apps and skills are absolutely free. On the air at 1330 WFIN and 95.5 FM. Online at WFIN.com and on your smartphone, tablet, and Alexa devices.
Why should your high school student choose Millstream Career Center?
My name is Jose. I'm a senior at Lipsick. I attend Millstream Career Center as a part of the Teaching Professions program. So I just decided to take a chance on the program, and honestly, I do not regret anything. Owe it to the support that I receive at Millstream, not only from my teachers, but also from my classmates.
Hello, my name is Connor Rood, and I chose construction at Millstream, and that's what I see myself pursuing after high school. We are always being presented with opportunities to better ourselves and get the most out of our program. Millstream has been the highlight of my high school years, and I could not be happier with my decision.
My name is Junie McMaster, and I'm a student of Findlay High School. I've been at Millstream for almost 2 years, and I can honestly say that it's been wonderful. Millstream is a wonderful opportunity for anyone to have, and I would say if you can, take it. Without it, I wouldn't know where to go next, but thanks to it, I have a goal and a dream.
Find out more online at millstreamcc.org. We talk to the coaches here on the WFIN Coaches Corner. Hi, this is John Marshall. Join me each week from Ralphie's for the Coaches Corner, presented by the Granary Gibson Furniture. We'll cover the Findlay Trojans, the BBC, University of Findlay, and much more. The coaches' comments are here each and every week. The Coaches Corner, Wednesday nights at 6 on 1330 WFIN, WFIN.com, and 95.5 FM.
Your news authority is 1330 WFIN. And now at 95.5 FM.
Welcome back to the State of the City, sort of fireside chat. I'm Chris Oakes with Findlay Mayor Christina Murn, and we say fireside chat, but we don't actually have a fireplace.
We should have put a nice little candle.
We tried to start a fire, and the Marathon Center didn't want us to, so we're at
I would agree with
the Marathon Center for the Performing Arts, and we have a number of questions here that have been submitted by residents from around the city, and actually from even outside the city. We're going to get to as many of them as we possibly can in the half hour or so that we have remaining in our time. And also should mention, you said you will have answers to really all of the questions up online, even the ones that we don't get to here, right?
Yeah, so if there are questions we don't get to today, our goal is to kind of put together little snippets and put them out on our social media as well as on our webpage to answer questions. And certainly, as always, if folks have questions just on a regular basis, they can email us or contact us, and we try to do our best to get back to them.
Okay, so I don't want anybody's feelings to get hurt if your question doesn't get read. There are also a number of questions that are pretty much on the same subject and different questions relating to the same subject, so we're going to try and group as many of those together as we can. This one comes from Chase P. from the First Ward. Findlay has seen economic growth, but how do you ensure that prosperity reaches all residents equally rather than deepening economic divides? And what concrete steps will you take to address disparities in wages, housing, and long-term economic security for lower-income families? I thought that was a wonderful question.
We're just starting off. Real easy,
jump into the deep end.
Simple question. You know, economic prosperity and a strong community is something that is really complex. You know, I'm a little bit of a nerd. My degree's in economics, and I enjoy figuring out those complexities. But it's really about making sure that we continue to bring all types of different jobs so that you have accessible jobs to people with different backgrounds and skill sets. Continuing to increase the supply. Again, a diversified supply is important. One of the things that I think we need to look at, and I don't think it is every issue that we deal with is not a city government solved problem, right? And one of the reasons that we've been so successful as a community is that we work together, bringing in the public sector, bringing in the schools, bringing in businesses, bringing in nonprofits, and figuring out what is the role that all of us have to play in solving this problem. So one of the things, obviously housing is a top one. The city can't necessarily build houses. That's not the business we should be in, but we can help with infrastructure, helping and attract businesses. One of the other things that we continue to hear from folks is transportation. We have a spread out community, and a community our size, we are one of the only in the state that doesn't have some form of fixed point transportation system. So HATS is really met capacity. How do we look at continuing to help support folks that either don't have a driver's license or don't have a car? That's really, it's expensive to have a car. And so being able to help with folks like that. One of the things that I also think is really beneficial that I want to continue to see grow is the Financial Opportunity Center, helping people, no matter who you are, with financial coaching and financial and budgeting and all of those kind of basic principles that set people up for success, and helping them. And by coming alongside them, then we're going to be more successful as a whole.
On a related note, Alexandra from Ward 4 asks, as a Republican, what steps do you take to make sure that you are representing everyone in Findlay?
Yeah, I really don't see my position as a Republican or Democratic position. And I know people don't always like that because I am a Republican, but the thing is that at the local level, the majority of the issues, the filling the potholes, the firefighters, all of those different services are not dependent on a political belief. Now, we always joke, well, I have mayors that are friends of all walks of life, and we always say there's not a Republican or Democratic way to fill a pothole, and then I always tell them, but there is a Republican or Democratic way to fund it. And so I think that my approach is really, I care for this community. This is my home. I love these people. I want everyone to feel welcome and to feel successful and to provide them opportunity. And so I think continuing to have the mindset of, I don't want national rhetoric, I don't want political divide to be what shapes our community. I want good governance and caring for people and building a strong community to be what leads us.
Which leads us to Kathy's question, also from the 4th Ward, more directly on the social side of that question. How will Findlay handle, in her words, the frenzy of attacks by our new president in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the strides that the city of Findlay has made in this area?
Again, really easy questions we're throwing out here. I think that, again, it's about caring for people. And I think as a community, we can make sure that people feel welcome without making other people feel attacked. And we all have diverse viewpoints. We all have diverse backgrounds. And I want Findlay to be a place where people can walk down the street, go to work, have a life, and they don't feel like they are being questioned about the things that really aren't the government's business, in my opinion. And so certainly we'll continue to make sure that people's constitutional rights are protected, while also just making sure that we're focused on the things that are our day-to-day city government business.
And then this one was an anonymous question, actually, from a county resident, it says here, and this is with respect to that. I thought this was a wonderful question with respect to that, and kind of expanding that to include the immigrant population. She says, he or she says, what can I do as a community member to ensure the safety and well-being of our immigrant population during this stressful time? And I would expand on that to what we're talking about here, anyone who feels marginalized.
Yeah, so I think before I kind of dig into that question, let's talk about the immigrant situation, because I know there's been a lot of questions. We didn't really receive actually any specific questions about the immigrant populations outside of how I support them, but I know that there was lots of people commenting about it on social media. And so I think it's really important to first and foremost recognize that the city of Findlay will certainly uphold the law. Individuals that are in our community illegally will be held accountable. Individuals committing crimes in our community will be held accountable. But the federal government, we are a constitutional federal republic in the United States, and the federal government sets immigration policy. I don't set immigration policy. I don't think any of you set immigration policy. I don't see any members of Congress or the Senate. And so we will make sure that we are following federal law. The immigrant population in our community is here under temporary protected status. Largely, we do have many individuals that have work visas or student visas that are within our community, and I want to make sure that they are welcome and are connected and are thriving in our community, just like I went for anybody else who is in our community. And so we will make sure that we are complying with federal law and helping folks. Some of the things we focused on are obviously like the language barrier and understanding the healthcare system, which is challenging for anyone, but especially when you're not used to it. I've had people reach out on how they can help our immigrant population, feel acclimated and know it would definitely be a very scary situation to just not know what your future holds. And if you're going to lose your home or be sent somewhere. And really, I think it's just being educated about the process and what is and is not happening, what is and is legal, but also just making sure that if you know someone, that you're helping them recognize, okay, do you have your proper paperwork? Okay, well that affords you protections when you're in the United States. And if you don't, well then that means that there may be repercussions. But it's a very complex topic, but I think from our standpoint, making sure that we're upholding the law, but also being that welcoming place that we want to be.
We had a number of questions that were submitted regarding the housing question, and we touched on that before a little bit, and there are additional questions with respect to the housing crisis. Is there the sense that the immigration issue is contributing to the housing crisis?
Yeah, there definitely is that sense, and there's certainly that possibility, right? When you have an increase in people, supply and demand causes pinch points. But I think one of the really key things to mention on that, because again, I've seen a lot of misinformation about this, is that the city of Findlay is not paying for their housing in any way. People are responsible for paying for their own housing, just as any other resident would be. But yeah, it's a struggle. They're renting, they're buying, they're staying in hotels, but they're paying their own way.
Specifically with respect to the housing crisis, Amanda from the 4th Ward asks, are there any specific plans in place to address the current housing crisis that Findlay is facing? Again, I know we talked a little bit about that, but specific concrete plans?
Not at this point in time. Again, I think we're going to have more discussions on how can we help incentivize, how can we help with infrastructure, what are those things that we may be able to do, and how can we advocate from state support as well.
Selena from the 1st Ward asks, have area churches, such as the Church of the Living God, which is the former school building, have they been contacted to offer housing to the homeless? And is the former Lincoln Elementary being considered for low-cost housing to the homeless? You had touched on very early plans possibly moving forward for that piece of property.
The Lincoln School project will be market rate housing, to my knowledge. And looking at the Church of the Living God, no, I have not spoken with them. I don't know if somebody else has. I would not necessarily, housing for unhoused individual comes with a lot of complexities. I don't think they're fully equipped for that. I don't think that it would be pretty costly to modify that building to be able to serve that. But our unhoused population, obviously we implemented some new laws. And again, that was to be able to come alongside people and help them. And sometimes tough love is necessary with individuals who may be struggling with mental health issues or addiction issues. Again, unhoused or homelessness is increasing across the country. It's something that is happens to different individuals because of a variety of reasons, and we have a really good system in place to assist people, but we need to continue to adjust it for the immediate needs that are ever evolving. So I know that seems like a non-answer, but that's because it's really complex, and every day it's a little bit different.
Mandy from the county asks with respect to the homelessness question, and this is touching on an issue that made quite a bit of headlines when it was announced. What efforts, aside from applying misdemeanor charges and fines, are being considered in regard to further supporting our unhoused community members?
Yeah, so one of the key things that we are doing with the unhoused and that process is that when our officers encounter someone who is unhoused and they're, living in a tent underneath a bridge, we're not just going in and saying, get out, we don't care what happens to you. We are saying, we care about you so much, we don't want you living on the side of this river. Well, typically when we have those interactions, you have a couple of different responses. Well, this is where I want to be, and what are you going to do about it? And we say, well, that's not allowed here, so if that's what you're going to do, then you got to find somewhere else. And that's unfortunate, but that is the decision they're making. Others, it is because of mental health issues. One of the key things we're doing is anytime we are tagging a tent or telling someone, hey, here's a homeless individual, we're connecting them with Family Resource Center. And so we're having them go and do kind of a check-in on them. So a wellness check, right? To say, hey, do you have medication that you need? When was the last time you took it? Do you have family you can call? Do you need a meal? Do you need a shower? Here's where we can take you. Is there somewhere else that you can, are familiar with? Because we know that if somebody spends, and I forget the number specifically off the top of my head, number of nights on the street, you literally have brain damage from that because you are in a constant state of fight or flight. A lot of the other folks then also have that mental health challenge or addiction issues. And if they have addiction issues, again, it may be connecting them to a detox facility, it may be connecting them to those. It may also be where it is necessary to put them in jail to get them stabilized, to then be able to get them in a spot where they go need resources. So again, it's a case-by-case basis, but we're not just going in and ticketing somebody right out of the gate. That is a couple of steps in after we've tried to connect them with resources, after we've tried to give them that stability.
This question from Steve in the 5th Ward speaks to the annexation question that we were touching on a little bit earlier some time ago, and this is more than just for business development, but some time ago the city had an annexation effort. What is the status and result of that effort, and are there plans for it to continue?
So that was a desire to try to clean up some of the random pockets and different things. We have seen some of those. They're still in process. Annexation is a long, tedious, obnoxious process. The Ohio Revised Code should speed it up a little bit, but that's a whole other issue. But when we are looking at that, we do have a number of properties that have chosen to move forward. A couple of residentials, a couple of the little islands. So you'll see over the next couple of weeks, one of the condos, Northtown condos, they wanted to annex in. So that is ongoing. At this point in time, the city of Finley is no longer covering the cost of the surveying and paperwork of that. But it is something, obviously if a property owner is interested in annexing, we'll kind of explain the process, pros and cons, and work with them to do that.
With respect to the economic development aspect of annexation, as we were touching on earlier, Brand, who is a county resident, asks, will you be helping the surrounding townships with their economic growth or help them keep their economic growth? And again, you were kind of alluding to some of that. Ask you to expand on that.
Yeah, so with a revenue sharing agreement, obviously townships get their revenues from the property taxes on those properties. And so when a property annexes into the city of Finley, if they chose to do that, then what occurs is there's a titration of the revenue that would go to the township for a number of years. It's between like 10 and 12 years that they continue to receive a percentage of the revenue. When we're looking at our revenue sharing agreements, they were a little more generous. So we'll work through what that looks like moving forward. But I think as we look at the community as a whole, townships have different desires for what they want to look like than maybe the city, and we'll continue to work on that. But one of the things that is important is obviously the private property rights of properties that are adjacent to the city. And if they see an opportunity and want to annex into the city, I think that that's kind of their decision.
Michelle asks, what happened to the city's love of historic preservation? And again, this kind of touches on that economic development question as well. Specifically, she singled out the property on East Lincoln next to the YMCA, which I know was in the headlines last year. But in a larger sense, just to kind of expand on Michelle's question, when Sarah Sisser was still the executive director of the Hancock Historical Museum, when that property, that whole issue came up with that property, she suggested creating some sort of task force or an intentional group to get together to see if there was more that the city could do to incorporate historic preservation into its deliberate plan to protect some of that. And I know that we have another one, another question with respect to that coming up soon with the moving of the probate court, the county probate court, into their new building. What's going to happen with the existing structure there, which isn't a city issue per se, but it brings this whole question up. So what about historic preservation, which is, I know, historically something that the city of Findlay has been very proud to preserve many of its historic buildings. Are we losing that?
You know, we obviously have had to tear down a lot of historical buildings over the last decade, primarily related to flood mitigation. Obviously, there was full blocks of properties that were removed because they were so flood prone, and part of where the flood mitigation efforts were going to be. I think we still have a love for historical preservation. Unfortunately, historic preservation also takes a lot of money when trying to redevelop a building. And when we have property owners that are wanting to make an investment in a property, and the historic tax credit program is either very expensive or retrofitting for an elevator or a fire suppression system, all of the things that are required to have a safe building today, it becomes very cost prohibitive. So you have then a decision point. Do you not make the investment and it sits there and is just empty or decaying? Or do you retrofit it? Or do you level it and build something new that is going to meet your needs? So that's definitely a balance. I would love to just see the preservation of all of the buildings, but that's also not always feasible in a capitalist society. So I think there are things we can do. I think we're looking at some programs to help with historic reinvestment. The state has also been coming out with some programs that could potentially help investors. Obviously, the building in question with the YMCA project is still there, and I think they're hoping somebody someday will want to take it and do something with it. Related to the specific region, that's not something, obviously the downtown region has the design review board to help with preservation. I think some of the different neighborhoods are looking at potentially doing something, but at this standpoint, the city of the whole is not looking at something. So if somebody has a good recommendation, I'm happy to review it, but that's not something I have a lot of margin to really pursue.
Kyle from the 4th Ward has a good question. As we were talking about the downtown recreation area, or the downtown park as it's been referred to, there were a number of questions relating to that, but one that I thought Kyle brought up a good point. Will local landscape companies have any opportunities with respect to the beautification of that park, or to be a part of that development?
Yeah, so there is going to be a lot of different elements that will have to be bid out as part of that project. So we will definitely be asking different companies to, one of the directives that we gave the contractor is anytime there is a possibility, we want to use a locally sourced business or Ohio business. We want to keep it as regional economic impact as possible. So that is something that they're keeping in consideration. I don't think we will necessarily need local businesses to provide the design scope of it, but potentially the actual services of installation and sourcing.
Kay from the 5th Ward asks, do you support the Findlay City School tax levy, which will be voted on in the May 6th primary? And if so, what would you be doing to show your support and encouragement of that levy?
Yeah, definitely. Findlay City Schools, strong schools in general is core to a strong community. And I know that it is a very complex topic. School funding is a complete disaster in the state of Ohio and very convoluted. And so my very quick snippet is I will continue to support the levy committee. I will continue to emphasize the importance of the investment in our schools. And I will also continue to write letters to the editor, share information on my website. One thing that I want to point out, again, very convoluted, but when we talk about Findlay City Schools not getting new revenue for the past 20 years, when you look at their levies, they are on there as continuous levies. And what that means is that the amount that they voted on at that point in time set that dollar amount that they received. And on any of their inside millage, they don't receive an increase in that property value tax. They only receive it on the outside millage portion. So they have received a very minimal amount of increase in revenue associated. So someone the other day said, you know, well, Findlay City Schools, keep talking about needing to make these cuts if a levy doesn't pass, and then you haven't made cuts. Well, first of all, they've had to just tighten their belt across the board. But one of the examples I used the other day, and I think it rings true, is you wouldn't go up to a person who has been starving or malnourished and say, I need you to give up 3 more meals before I'm going to be willing to buy you your next one. They have been managing their expenses at a revenue of 20 years ago, when we know that costs have increased on so many different things. So if we want to attract good teachers, we need to increase their pay. To get students to school so that they aren't out causing trouble, we need to bus them to school. If we want to attract high performers that are going to fill the jobs that we want in this community, we have to make sure that when they're looking to come here, they say, okay, it's safe. Do they have good schools, and can I find a house? And if we can't mark those 3 boxes, they're not going to be able to come here. And if we can't get the right workers here, we're not going to be able to get the right businesses here. So I definitely support it. We have to pass it.
Ash from the 6th Ward asks a question that I think speaks to some of the confusion over exactly who funds what and where the money for the schools comes from. He asks, how do you plan on protecting and funding public schools in Findlay if the levy does not pass?
Yeah, we can't fund the schools. That's not how our structure of government works in the state of Ohio. There are a couple of cities that technically, I guess, oversee the schools. But no, our funding cannot go to the schools. We obviously look for opportunities to partner, whether it was the Safe Defend funds to create community safety, but that's also a tool of our safety services, or recently with the One Ohio opioid funds to continue to provide prevention programs for our students. Those are the opportunities for the city to partner, but the city cannot be responsible for funding our schools.
Shayna from the 1st Ward asked a couple of questions that I thought were kind of interesting real quickly here. What is the city doing to bring a bigger variety of businesses to the community?
Yeah, so it's always challenging. We definitely look at the market and what we want to bring in, and obviously from a economic, industrial, commercial, retail, one of the best things we can do is continue to support our local businesses. Success breeds success. So making sure that we are being a place that businesses see an opportunity for success. People all the time go, well, just call such and such a business and they'll come. Well, no, I wish, because there's a couple I do submit. I get on their forms on their website, and I'm like, hello, this is the mayor. I would really like you to come here. It doesn't really work, evidently, because nobody's called me back. But those are the types of things. If there's a business you want, we can try to bring it, but it's a business decision. So they are going to look at the market. When I was in business development, the first thing I did when I was looking at a hospital is I pulled up the data for their community, and I looked at their demographics, I looked at their income levels, I looked at their population within certain driving radius, I looked at, is there certain businesses there, and those are indicators of success. So as we continue to attract some of those businesses, it will help propel us forward.
Shayna also asks, how are the upcoming tariffs going to affect small businesses in Findlay? And I would expand on that. We obviously have a large number of multinational corporations that have a presence here in Findlay. How are those tariffs going to impact those businesses and the economics locally?
If I knew that answer, I would probably be making a lot of money in the stock market in a different job. No, I think obviously we are working with our businesses to make sure that they are positioned for success. Our multinational companies, primarily this is their North American headquarters, and so we are majority owned American companies. That's how they are structured, the majority of them. We don't really know this direct impacts, but what I can say is that we will work with our businesses through, we're very fortunate with the foreign trade zone, that will assist a lot of our businesses to probably bring product in that way to avoid the tariffs. But we will also look if there are ways for us to onshore other businesses or help grow additional businesses that may be impacted.
There are a couple of other questions. We're starting to run a little short on time, but I want to kind of combine a couple of other questions that were submitted with respect to, one was, why is the city not fixing the sewer covers that have major damage? There was another regarding the railroad crossings that are in not great shape. What can the city do to address those?
Yes,
problems?
so I know people are annoyed that I asked them to report the issues with the railroads, and it's because the railroads don't really care what I say. The only way we get them to pay attention is based off of quantity of complaints. And so we get on and we say, hey, we have an issue at this railroad. Hey, we have an issue at this railroad. We have an issue at this railroad. But if citizens also call and complain, it helps expedite it. So please do that. We are also doing it, but we need your assistance. On the sewer covers or potholes or damage to signs or traffic signals, please use our report a problem page. So on our home screen, finleyohio.gov, you can get on report a problem. That sends a ticket directly to the department responsible, and that is how things get done the most quickly. So please do that. So if that individual can report where the sewer issue is at, we are happy to go out and fix it.
Yeah, I think that was submitted anonymously, so it does say Ward 1, so I know it's somewhere in the first ward. The last of the community questions that I wanted to finish with, and we'll circle back from Chase in the first ward, because I thought this was a wonderful question that he asked. What is one thing about Findlay that always makes you smile?
I would say community gatherings. I was going to say like the very cheesy answer of the people, but sometimes they make me want to pull my hair out. Like a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh. But really getting together. So a great example is a couple weeks ago, we came here for the Wild Card Series event, and the Polky group did a performance, and they made us all get up and dance together. And I just looked around the room, and it made me so happy to see our community spending time together. So out at events or at events downtown or walking through the Jones Gallery, studios, all of those different things are really what made me happy, because it is the people, but it's about being community and enjoying what we have as shared resources.
Are there any, before we wrap up, we've got just a couple of minutes, any other items that we didn't touch on or things that you want to make sure that you address before we close this evening?
We covered a lot. That was great. Thank you, first of all, Chris and WFIN for doing this. Really, I think the thing is that we have a lot to be proud of in our community, but the work is never done. So we're going to keep serving our community well, and I would encourage you all to find ways to give back. And that doesn't mean you have to be on a committee. It doesn't mean you have to do anything special. It could be looking at your neighbors and saying, how can I help them today? Or knocking on their doors. I think our culture has lost so much of the connection. We talk about going from front porch people to back deck people. And I think that our culture has lost so much. So if we can all just look for better ways to be community, and then reach out. mayor@finleyohio.gov. We can provide information. We can direct you to resources. We try to put a lot of information out there, because I know even with it seems like endless ways to connect with people, it has become increasingly more difficult, and we don't sit on Facebook all day trying to respond to people's comments. It would be a full-time plus job, and we focus on doing the work as citizens. So please don't hesitate to reach out, but it's an honor to serve, and I appreciate everybody taking time to be here tonight.
Findlay Mayor Christina Mern, thank you very much for your time. Thanks to everyone for being here in person, especially on a
drive
day
safe,
that is
please,
less than ideal.
Walk safe
and
to your
thanks to everyone for joining us on air and online as well for today's State of the City Fireside Chat. If we do this again, we'll have to get a fireplace or something.
Flag chat.
The flag is nice, but we need a fireplace too. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and good night.